And Nandita said our team is already here.
Session of the 3-day National Radio Community Sammelan. So thank you very much for sparing your time to be present over here. So just for a brief, I now request our Joint Secretary, Supriya Sahu,
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the valedictory session of the 3rd National Community Radio Sammelan. But before I do a formal welcome, I would like to share a little secret with you, which people only in the ministry know. And that the secret is that after the Honorable Minister took charge of this ministry, the very first start question in the Parliament he had to reply was on the community radio position, and community radio which was also positioned at number 2, which means the question had to be answered in the Parliament. And therefore we had several long meetings, extending over the weekend to understand the community radio sector in India. And after learning that the permissions for the community radio stations were kind of getting delayed with WPC, he wanted the Telecom Ministry to expedite the permission and made a request to them. And we could not believe when within 24 hours we got 53 clearances for the community radio stations, which were pending for more than 6 months. So as I always say, that actually many of us, or in the normal parlance we say that people actually have baptism with fire. Here I say that our minister had actually baptism with community radio. So that day until today, CR is on his priority agenda. Sir, we are very proud to be in your team and very happy to work under your dynamic leadership. Thank you for accepting our invitation and coming. And on behalf of the community radio community, which is present here and not present here, I would like to welcome you, sir, with a bouquet. We all heard our secretary, Shri Uday Verma, speak yesterday, and we also heard about the 7-point roadmap he asked us to follow. A very warm welcome to all delegates, community radio practitioners, officials from the ministry, Doordarshan, AIR, Basil, and welcome to everybody from media. Sir, I'm also supposed to sum up actually the discussions that we have different models of community ownership, participatory processes, etc. However, what emerged out after all the discussions and deliberations is that if there has to be a true and deep engagement, speak about developing a charter for the how Department of Science could reach out to communities with various messages. We find that communities can handle the community radio station is definitely capacity building, skill training, and a kind of several different views coming from everybody for accepting our invitation and coming here. Thank you.
The awards. So with your permission, a brief overview of the awards of the National Community Radio process that we have adopted. So the awards were instituted in 2012 to promote better programming on community radio stations across the country. Broadly, there are 5 categories for which the awards are given, sir. The first category is the most creative, innovative program content awards. Is to encourage community radio stations to experiment and devise new formats of programming and presentations, or to encourage relevant to the community, the last mile as far as the community radio movement is concerned, and broadcast of the program. The fourth category of awards, promoting that speaks of India on the move in a nutshell. Encourage a radio station to innovate. This, with your permission, sir, may I kindly request you to present the awards on the content awards. The first prize Mewat, run by Smart NGO, New Haryana for its program Aapki Police, Aapke Dwar.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. This is my team.
Congratulations, बहुत-बहुत मुबारक हो।
Sir,
क्या नाम है आपके रेडियो का? रेडियो मेवात। गाने वाने भी बजाते हो कि?
so we promoted the Mirasis also. This was a program which we did for the police. When the SP used to come to the station and we used to get calls and used to sort out cases. We used to collect cases and come every Monday. And then we used to resolve a lot of issues. So it's a very popular program and we've been able to resolve a lot of issues, especially concerning women who could never go to the police. Thank you, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Benzigar, run by Benzigar Hospital Society, Kollam, Kerala, for its program Jana Shabdam.
Congratulations. आइए बीच में आ जाइए।
The third prize goes to SSM Community Radio, SSM College of Engineering.
Congratulations. It runs well. Good. How many hours a day do you do programming?
12 hours, 6 hours of news, 6 hours of reports.
6 hours of news.
No, sir, new programs. And we are yet to complete 1 year of completion.
Very good.
We now come to the second category of awards, the thematic awards. The first prize goes to Puduvai Vanani, run by Puducherry University, Pondicherry, for its program Ungalai Teddy. The second prize goes to Radio Benzigar, run by Benzigar Hospital Society, Kollam, Kerala, for its program Enikum Katha. The third prize goes to Rudy No Radio, run by Seva Academy, Ahmedabad, for its program Kajaj Kamdhar. We now come to the next category of awards, the Community Engagement Awards. The first prize. The second category. And the third prize goes to. I think they deserve a better round of applause for them. And the third prize goes to the CMS.
Joint Secretary Shrimati Supriya Sahu, who's really the heart and soul of this community radio movement, her colleague and our director, Mr. K.S. Regimon, officials from the ministry, Doordarshan, All India Radio, delegates to the workshop, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen. When I first started dealing with the question of community radio, I was trying to slot it in my mind as to where does it fit. Because the Indian broadcasting space has seen epoch-making transformation in the last 2 decades. We've gone from one broadcaster to 852 insofar as television is concerned, give or take a few. Supriyaji would have the exact figures with her. Even in the radio space, we've gone from one national broadcaster, All India Radio, to a plethora of FM radio stations across the country. Of course, news is not allowed to be broadcast, but ingenuity has no limits, and some of them do find their own ways of broadcasting a variant of news. And then you've had this complete explosion of what is called the new media space, or the social media space, whereby if you go by the estimates which are available in the public domain, India may be having about 7 crore broadcasters who are on Twitter, who are on Facebook, who are on various other media platforms. So therefore, the ability of people to be able to put out their views in the public space has gone up exponentially. And while we have the proliferation of the instruments of information dissemination on one hand, you have a growing intolerance and a growing impatience with the ability to be able to accommodate, if not appreciate, each other's viewpoint. And this is what I call the paradox of the short fuse. That while we have empowered people, technology has given us the opportunity to be able to increasingly become public even with our private views. Our ability to be able to take in that cross-section of opinion is unfortunately on a very thin-skin syndrome, for the lack of a better expression. And therefore, I was always trying to figure as to where does community radio fit into this paradigm. And one day, while I was applying myself to this question, a bulb clicked in my mind. And that is, before I became Minister for Information and Broadcasting, I had the honor of serving my party as its spokesperson for 4.5 years. And I used to always marvel that there are 2 discourses in this country. A national discourse, which is really relevant 2.5 miles of Raisina Hill. And there is another discourse which plays out in the rest of the country. While the former feeds into the latter rarely feeds back into the former. And I used to experience this on a weekly basis, that when I used to go to my constituency on a Friday evening, whatever we would do out here from Monday to Friday in terms of television debates, the various responses or the various proactivism on issues which were national or of international import or even of regional import, somehow none of that used to figure in the conversations which I used to have with my constituents. It seemed as if that discourse was really irrelevant to their lives. Their concerns were extremely local, their demands were development oriented, they were circumscribed by the immediate needs of their lives. And week after week I used to have this dichotomy that 5 days we would do something, and when we would go down to the people who have elected us and sent us here, I would realize that they seem to be living in a different world altogether. It was not the disconnect of the India and the Bharat, but it was the disconnect of different discourses which are playing out concurrently in this country on a 24/7 basis. And that is where I discovered that community radio or the community radio movement has a hugely important role to play. Because those concerns are neither discussed, nor debated, nor deliberated with the vigor which they deserve. Unfortunately, because some of those issues are extremely dry, they're extremely localized, they obviously would not generate the kind of excitement which advertisers are looking for, which essentially are the revenue models on which the broadcasting industry thrives. So therefore, they do not find that kind of visibility or find that kind of display in what we call colloquially the national discourse. But those are the real issues, which issues of poverty alleviation, issues of water, issues with regard to how rural communities or farming communities need to innovate and improve on their techniques. And I can go on chapter and verse delineating them. And therefore, we decided that we would try and give the community radio movement in this country the greatest fillip that we can. Unfortunately, since we are also, like other government departments, really thin in terms of the manpower that we can devote to this particular issue, it's an effort which really has to be led by the community. And I can understand that when Supriya ji flagged the issue of sustainability of community radio, possibly it is the most germane and the most vital issue which must be uppermost in the minds of people who run these very important but little initiatives on a 24/7 basis. And therefore, before I had come in, an initiative was taken with the Directorate of Audiovisual Publicity to start impaneling community radio to see as to how their revenue models can be made more sustainable. And if I remember correctly from the top of my head, about 6 crores of advertisement had gone out from the Directorate of Audiovisual Publicity in the past years to the community radio movement. Of course, it is a drop in the ocean compared to what we do for the rest of the media space, but I think it's a beginning which has been well made. But as we look forth into the 12th plan, and we have put in place a very holistic and a very comprehensive proposal. And I would like to read out some of the initiatives that we propose to take. That more than 500 new community radios are proposed to be set up in the 12th plan period. Assistance will be available for operating community radio stations. We are also working on several other important initiatives, which includes peer review of community radio stations, capacity building of community radio operators, code of ethics for self-regulation of content by community radio stations, etc. Out of the 100 crores proposed in the 12th plan, 10 crores are proposed for training, capacity building, awareness activities, and the remaining 90 crores have been proposed towards extending financial support towards the community radio station movement. Provision has been made for providing grants for innovation in the sector, for research and development of technology. We also have a provision for emergency grants for the community radio movement. And here I would like to, it is not that we are going to get circumscribed by the 100 crores that we have set forth in the 12th plan. If we find that the community radio movement actually picks up on the ground, it requires increasingly more support from the government, we would be more than prepared to walk the extra mile. But I think when you start talking about government funding, there are also questions of autonomy, there are also questions of arm's length relationships, there are also questions of the independence of the whole community radio movement, which need to be factored in. And those are questions which will have to be deliberated at length by the practitioners of this movement, because they are increasingly important that if we are going to have a vital and a vigorous and a robust debate in the community radio space, then to what level should be the government interface with this entire effort is something which will need to be determined. On spectrum fee, as Supriyaji has briefed you, we took it up, the Secretary took it up very proactively with the Ministry of Telecommunications. We believe that they are planning to respond to our request and waive the spectrum fee. We do look forward to their continued support in this endeavor, and if at all the Ministry of Telecommunications responds positively, I think they need to be applauded, because in the times that we live in, to take a decision with regard to the allocation of spectrum on possibly a pro bono or a subsidized basis, that is to be really complimented by the community radio movement for having demonstrated commitment in terms of action to this entire movement. Lastly, I would just like to end by saying that the Secretary flagged for my attention the issue of allowing news to be run on community radio. News, as you know, is a very tricky business, because when we started giving out licenses in the news and the non-news, non-current affairs category, somewhere that distinction seems to have blurred. So you have actually more news which runs on non-news channels, and you have views which run on news channels. So therefore, the entire paradigm has got completely redefined. But I think we will be able to make a beginning, and like what is proposed for FM in its third phase of expansion, that the All India radio capsules are supposed to be allowed to be run, if subject to the EGOM and the Cabinet taking a view on it, on FM channels. We can possibly think of, in the first phase, of extending the same concessions if somebody in the community radio movement would find that to be useful. Of course, there is going to be no compulsion at all. If somebody does not want to run it, you know, they are free not to accept it. But that's a beginning which we may be prepared to make, subject to, you know, whatever is the consensus among the various stakeholders. And once again, I would like to compliment you. You've completed 10 years of this pioneering effort. And as we go into more anniversaries of this truly revolutionary movement. I do hope that conferences like this would be hosted by the community radio movement itself, and the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting would really be invited as a guest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving us your...